Welcome back to the Tuesday weekend. We are talking about leftovers this week. One of the other topics, which I think is a good conversation to be had here, is exactly how long one should hold on to leftovers. Well, okay, if you freeze them, most things you could get 1 to 3 months out of. I know a lot of people treat their freezers as time capsules and will pull things out from 4 years ago. And it was like, oh, there's just a little freezer burn. Cut that off. It's just fine.
Look, this is from the Swenson wedding, the cake. This was great. Let's warm this up.
Exactly.
That was in 72.
Right. You don't need to do that. It really is better if you try to rotate through that food too and don't just leave it in the freezer to, well, eventually die.
So anyway, this is going to be more about not freezing leftovers at home, but actually leftovers from a restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
Leftovers from, you went out to dine last night and didn't quite finish that filet mignon, and then you brought it home. How long can that stay in the fridge before I should just throw it away?
Let's play How Long Should I Keep This? Before I answer that question, I will say, as somebody who, my wife makes fun of me for the fact that I almost always take a doggy bag home, especially if we go out and there's an appetizer and then I have a salad and then I have an entree. In all my years in the kitchen, I got so used to nibbling throughout the day that I cannot sit down to a big plate of food. If you give me 4 hours, yes, I will make my way through that. In fact, I had somebody comment about the fact that it took me an hour and a half to eat a dozen chicken wings. Well, first, I was in no rush. We're sitting there drinking and having a good conversation. And I mean, yeah, I have my wings there. Sure, they're not warm by the time I reach those last ones, but
that's when you start getting into, like, you might have to, cool those down in an ice bath and put them in the fridge, yeah. Josh.
So anyway, but yes, so I'm somebody who definitely takes food home. So that filet mignon, honestly, with the quality of that steak, I would try to use it the next day. But I would say if you're taking home cooked meat, try to use it within 2 to 3 days.
So ramen,
leftover ramen,
leftover pork ramen.
Okay, with a soup, I would, as long as you bring it back up to a boil, I think you've got 4 days.
Okay. Seafood pasta.
Any seafood dish, I would strongly urge to eat within the first 18 hours because seafood really, it does turn faster than other proteins.
Also, as a side note, don't bring home that half piece of salmon. You're not going to eat it.
No. If you give it to the cat, I suppose. Also, do not microwave your leftover shrimp. It's just nasty.
Yes, it doesn't work at all. A nice muffalata.
That I think could last. It's a little bit more durable. Okay, depending if there's a lot of tomato in there and there's some moisture in there, that will actually reduce the shelf life because bacteria need moisture to grow. I think you've got 4 or 5 days.
Wings.
That's okay. The maximum to me is 5 days. If you can't eat it in 5 days, it's about time to let it go. But wings are right there at the max, especially if they are fried, cooked all the way through properly the first time. Yeah, and then cooled down and refrigerated properly. You're fine.
Any lettuce-based salad.
As soon as you can, especially if it's dressed already. If somehow you have leftover undressed salad where it's just the dry components in a bowl, it will wilt in probably, well, depending on the lettuce you use and a couple other things, a day or two.
Yeah.
I would try to eat that as quick as you can. By the next morning, it's all kind of sogged out and not as
yeah. I mean, my mom makes a fantastic Caesar salad, and we would have that, well, like say, as an early dinner on a Sunday, and then I would go into work and come back later and eat the rest of the salad.
Now, the one exception that I just thought of is a panzanella, because the bread actually will kind of absorb all those flavors. And so, in fact, a panzanella is better the next day.
Let's say a cream-based dessert, not a pastry, but more like a cheesecake or something like that.
3 to 4 days. Well, okay. Well, a cheesecake, you're probably good going, the full 5, especially if you have it contained properly. It should last. But I just don't understand how that sits there for 5 days without getting eaten. So,
Here's a fun one: a beef Wellington,
well, but
just a standard one.
there's not a good way to. Well, you throw it in the oven is how you
Yeah.
reheat a beef Wellington. But the longer you wait, just the less satisfying it's going to be when you come back. It comes back out. You're not going to get that nice crust on the outside
Mhm.
and still have the inside moist and juicy. You can get one or the other. So either if the Wellington and especially I imagine the mushroom duxelle in there is still kind of juicy when it's done, then the crust, that whatever that puff pastry is probably going to get too wet to ever get really good again. Or you'll have the opposite problem where that outside will be nice and crispy and flaky, but then everything inside is just going to be dry. So that one, I would say the next day if you can.
And here's one where I actually had to sit down with the general manager and floor manager for telling a customer no. Oysters on the half shell.
Oh, geez. No.
Exactly.
Just no. You eat them right there, you're done.
Literally had a guest get furious at me for this. And then the day manager was mad that I couldn't get written up or fired because I'm like, that's a violation of, you can't give someone raw seafood to take home that it's been sitting on their table for an hour.
That is not, there is no,
they're going to put it in their car and go
union
shopping and then die.
Well, okay. You can get that, or essentially you could get a special use permit from some county health departments to allow that, because there are all sorts of regulations and setups, that you have to have if you have anything out of the ordinary like that. So yeah, no, because okay, with shellfish, they're alive. They're, when they're sitting on ice, they're alive. As soon as you kill it by opening that shell, that meat starts to putrefy. And that might not be the word you want to hear, but that is the process that's going on. And so if you let it wait a few hours, it's just, there's all sorts of bacteria that grows in there. There's all sorts of chemicals that the kind of death process takes over, that like it's not going to be as good. Okay, now sure, you could get the jarred oysters, the pre-shucked ones.
That's different. I'm talking literally
but that's different.
Oysters on the half shell.
But no, like it's just way too risky to try to shuck them here and then take them somewhere else to eat them.
So people, if you're taking oysters home, make sure they're not shucked yet and they've been refrigerated until you get them home, and keep them refrigerated until you
keep
shuck
them on ice. Exactly. Keep them in a bag that is a plastic bag of ice that is not sealed, because they still need to breathe. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, it's a weird thing, but shellfish need to breathe. And, but they can breathe out of the water for days. It's kind of crazy. Our metabolism won't do that. We can't breathe underwater for days. Yeah, no, it's leftover seafood is a kind of a weird thing. And outside of maybe a paella, I try to avoid it as much as I can.
It's something that's like, if there's seafood in it, I live in Little Italy, and there's some real, there's a place that does like a squid ink gnocchi and a lobster bisque shrimp sauce. It is fantastic. I can see taking that home and eating it later that night, or maybe the next morning at the latest the next morning. Yeah. Maybe taking it and cooking it into an omelet to reheat it properly. Sure. And doing something like that. There's things I've gone out and say like, oh, this would be great in an omelet. This would be a great filling in an omelet. And it actually turns out really good and have that one unique style one time. And it's like,
exactly. Like this, this is the best duck confit, beet, and goat cheese omelet in the Western United States this morning. Yeah.
It's like I told you that when I went to that really, really nice steak place out here, born and raised, and had a 71-day-old dry-aged ribeye. And the bartender's like, hey, man, take that fat cap home and then render it down and cook eggs in it. And oh my God, that was good.
Yeah.
You don't think about stuff like that. There are some things you can take home as a leftover that you can use in a recipe the next day.
Essentially
next day.
Exactly. It becomes an ingredient the next day.
The next day.
It isn't a leftover story. But when I was in the golf course in Tennessee, at one point we had gotten in 2 Wagyu loins that were like the A1. These were beautiful. And I do not eat a lot of beef. And these to me were just like, oh, look. And so as tenderly and carefully as I could, trimmed that down because there's still the silver skin in there. There's still, I wanted the nice,
Yeah.
and so I had just this small pile of scrap left over. I mean, and it was absolutely not anything I could serve, but it was also not a thing I was about to throw out.
Yeah.
And so I took some of the 3-year aged cheddar, and I made the most decadent quesadilla I have ever eaten out of just the scraps of that Wagyu and the aged cheddar. And I ate about a third of it and gave the rest to my crew because, like, everyone, you got to try this. But it just, yeah, that was special. All right, well, we're getting pretty close to time here. So, any other final leftover thoughts you have before we get to our restaurant shoutouts?
First off, and this goes out to all the service industry people, box things properly and mark them.
Oh, geez, right. What's on the box?
Yes. Now, there is a little, since COVID, there is a little, some places allow you to box things, some places don't. So if someone says, hey, I want to box this up, when you get the box, write down, hey, they're having the lasagna. And like when they see the box says lasagna, they'll actually appreciate that. The places I've worked over the last, honestly, 6 years, I'm not allowed to touch stuff and box it anymore. So if someone says, can I get a to-go box? And I hand them a box, they're like, what's this? Secondarily on to-go, if you want something to go, kind of be prepared to just put the stuff off your plate into the box.
Mhm.
I mean, some places let you do it, some places don't. I know it's not a law, I know it's not a rule, but a lot of places they set these rules up and say like, hey, this works for us, we're just not changing this. Secondarily, don't come into a happy hour and ask for everything to go. That is a big thing, and it has happened at every job I have had. Hey, we want this and this and this, and like they'll order $50, $60 for the food off happy hour and be like, and we want it to go. Here is the reason why. Nobody makes money on happy hour on the food. Nobody.
Mm-hmm.
You're there to order drinks and at least let us make some margin, and you get to try our new food and see the ambiance and stuff. You don't show up to a happy hour and say, I want this to go. You just don't do that.
A couple weekends ago, my Italian restaurant closed at 9:00 and had a couple come in at 8:50. It was like, oh, hey, is it too late to get a to-go order? I don't want to take up a table, but if we could just get some food. And so I thought they meant for the two of them. And we said, all right, sure. The kitchen hadn't packed up fully yet. So it's like, hey, guys, one more ticket. I think it's just 2 people. And then they ordered food for 6. And it was a much bigger ask of the kitchen than I thought.
Yeah.
And just like, I mean, I guess they pulled one over on me because if they had said, hey, can we order food for 6 people? I would have said, sorry, the kitchen's already wrapping up.
That's a front of house thing you need to learn. It's always, how many people are you ordering food for? People came into my bar, hey, we're going to eat. And I'm in a hotel bar and by myself. I have one cook. I'm like, okay, fine, no problem. We've got some friends coming in. And their friends turned out to be 25 people. And I finally asked the guy, and I'm like, I have like 10 different checks going and stuff. And I'm like, and they decided to put all these tables together in the lobby to make their own 25 top. And I finally go to him like, so what are you guys all doing here? Oh, well, we went out to go eat and like there was no tables. And I'm like, 25 of you went to eat on a Friday night in San Diego in Gaslamp. And they're like, yes. And I'm like, and you didn't get a reservation anywhere. And they're like, well, they wouldn't really give us a reservation for 25.
Yeah, no kidding.
They wanted to charge us for like a banquet type thing. And I'm like, yeah, that's how it works.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, well, we'll be doing this tomorrow. And I'm like, you most certainly will not be doing this here tomorrow.
Yeah.
They're like, why? And I'm like, because I just said so. I'm the only person here. I have your 25 top and the 40 top in my bar on a Friday night. All the 40 people drinking and eating appetizers and stuff. That is my usual gig. Mm-hmm. I'm like, we are not a restaurant that takes large parties. If you would have told us, we would have charged you a banquet fee to get 25 people and food for it.
Oh, sure. If you want to do a buyout of my dining room at that point, sure, $4,500. It's yours.
Yeah, it's all you.
Problem. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and again, I mean, a little bit off the leftover thing, but then all these people, can we box all this up? And I had literally walked out with a bag of to-go boxes and said, here you go. Don't have time to box up 25 entrees.
Yeah, no. That is actually one thing that I meant to mention when I was discussing banquets is kind of the conflict between the whole notion that the buffet line cannot run out of food, and most buffets that I've worked at, most banquet departments, they do not allow the guests to take leftovers. So there is necessarily food left on that line. And again, my strongest suggestion is let your
Food bank.
servers,
The servers
the crew
first,
have
food
it.
bank second.
Absolutely. The dishwashers, absolutely.
No, every banquet
if
I
there's-
worked, as soon as they left, I'd go downstairs and be like, okay, food is upstairs. And I'd tell the cooks and the dishwashers, come, and I would actually make plates for the guys downstairs. Like, here you go if you want some.
Unless you had anything else to get back to with leftovers.
No. That's no such thing as leftover drinks. You can't take those home generally.
Mm-mm.
People ask, can I take this with me? No, you can't take that with you.
I have occasionally had a leftover beer at home, like one that I pop and then realize I only drank like the top third of it, and then it's sitting there the next morning. Mac and cheese. Use it instead of the milk in your next batch of mac and cheese. Throw a little mustard in there. Yeah, it comes out good.
I'm going to try that. Also, the tip the other week when we were talking breakfast about the baked potatoes for hash browns, dude, that was legit good.
All right.
Yeah, baked them, put them in the fridge. I grated up one and then diced the other one. I think the diced worked better.
Sure.
But it was really, really good.
Oh, sweet. Well, yeah, and there we go. If you have leftover baked potatoes, though very rarely is baked potato the one that gets served with Thanksgiving dinner.
It's a restaurant thing.
Yeah, it's a restaurant thing. So, yeah, potato pancakes. But if you have them baked, go ahead and make hash browns. But, all right.
Actually, if you fried mashed potatoes.
You get a whole bunch of butter in a pan and you throw some mashed potatoes, like well-seasoned mashed potatoes in there. It's
fry them up so they're crisp on the outside.
Mm-hmm. At one point, I was kind of giving my cooks a demonstration on the difference between a latke, a baksti, and a rotsti, because it's basically 3 different styles of potato pancake, with one with mash, one with shredded, whatever. They're all good. I love them all. Anyway, so restaurant shout outs. I am going to shout out the Maine Beer Shed in Kingsfield, Maine. And I know this was, I think, actually my first or second shout out that I made, but the owners, Kate and Brian, have announced that they are closing the shop at the end of December because they are moving down to Rhode Island to be closer to family. So anybody in the Northeast, if you are in New England, go up to Maine, go up to Kingfield and drop by the Maine Beer Shed and just go have some hand pies, drink some beer. They still have their pizza oven going. It's a good time, and I just want to give as much love to them as I can before they close their doors.
My restaurant shout out is going to be Fort Oak. There is a restaurant group in San Diego called Trust. They have a restaurant also called Trust. They have about, I think it's 13 restaurants. I'm not sure. And I know that 4 of them are the same restaurant, but it's all up the coast now because they've been so popular. But Fort Oak is one of their originals, and they have an eclectic style of food. I mean, we're talking pistachio sauces, different things. They change their menu regularly, which I love about restaurants that do that. They have a couple of standards, but they always have new stuff on, different things they have. They have great craft cocktails, a great bar, a great wine list. The food is fantastic. The building is very unique. I mean, it's one building. It's like it was an old hotel or something, but there's like 3 different dining rooms, and one's kind of indoor, outdoor. The other 2 are indoor, but they're all glass surrounded. So like I'm eating here and I can look over there and see the other dining room like 30 feet away, and I can see different parts of the kitchen. And it's just a great place to eat. The service is fantastic. It's just a wonderful, wonderful place.
That's cool. All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up for our leftover, leftover episode. So thank you for listening. Join us again next week, though I believe as we are getting to the holiday season, we might just have 1 or 2 more episodes left for this season, and then we're going to call it a wrap on season 1, and we'll get to season 2, which will be bigger, better, more wonderful, all those great things. Yeah.
And uncut, so you can hear all of the stuff we talk about when we stop for breaks or pause.
Oh, geez. Do you want the full hour and 40 minutes that we actually talk? Oh, sure.
Sure, why not?
Sure, why not? Anyway, I am Josh Hobson. That is Nick Parkin over there. The music you're hearing was made by Andrew Smith, and Deneen Oliver does our social media. Thank you, and we will see you again next week. And actually, I did mean to mention all the way in the first block, as a kid, growing up with 2 brothers, leftovers was rarely a thing I ever had to encounter.
No,